break out the VHS tape to finish the film. It was nice to have smooth runnings. And thank you everybody for sticking around. We can jump right into the discussion part of the evening. In Awakening, one of the many things I thought about was the tension between the marketplace and the community, or is there a tension between those two places or realms?
Well, is there a tension? I suppose there is. I wanted to show other uses of the public space of the street, and it was at the height of critical mass, and so that was one example of the streets being taken over by the bicycle. And then the Friday night skate was another example of that. And incidentally, that footage came to me completely as a gift from somebody I met at a party, and I was describing this project, and he said, "Oh, you have to have Friday night skate. I'll send you my footage." So that was a surprise and quite a nice gift. And I'm always looking for visual ways to tell the story. So I would say that's a central motif or vision.
Is satire part of your work, would you say? Or
is it what?
Satire? Do you use satire to...
Well, a critical edge and can appear as satire. Yeah. Awakening is, I think, experimental in form, but it's also a traditional interview subjects as documentary. So the subjects are telling the story, and I look for ways to segue from one person to another to pick up the same either phrase, sometimes just a continuation of that story that I wanted to tell.
I like the music choices in particular for Awakening 20th Century, like this kind of spacey, I don't know how to describe it, but can you talk about use of music in the films and something that we can open up for some questions or let people gather their thoughts?
Well, Jimmy T is not here this evening, but he's a brilliant sound designer, and he created the collage, which is an imaginary imagining what's emanating from the Suco Tower at any given moment to use broadcast fragments of radio just to introduce the idea of a couple of the participants. So yeah, I think that music was actually from Jim. Yeah, but maybe questions would be the way to go.
Yeah. Do we have any questions for Chip? We had William Farley here earlier. I want to make a quick announcement. A week from today, we're going to show his new feature documentary. It's called I Wanted to Be a Man with a Gun, about World War II veterans. These really intense interviews with these gentlemen, and we're going to show that next week. So mark a calendar. You had a hand up here?
Yeah. Sure. When listening to these interviews that you did 20-some years ago, what are your impressions on, I guess, what their impression of the future would be like, and what the future of the city would be like as opposed to now? How has that changed in your opinion?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's the essential question, right? It's interesting to look back and remember, it seemed so shocking to me when there was a Wells Fargo branch that opened in Safeway, which was a sort of, everything was going .com at that point. And it was, I think San Francisco was very optimistic about the tech world for a while, and then, it all kind of crashed a little bit. So, but for me, looking at this film now, it was kind of surprising how much it was about working visually, working from home, in a way that we think with all the pandemic that created that. But here it was a force that was at work at the turn of the century. And, you have some some of the people are subscribers to that idea and going full speed ahead, and others have a critical element within their discussion of that.
I'd like to comment about the computer and the car, the relationship of the computer and the car.
Yeah.
That you couldn't replace, you could replace the car, but you couldn't replace the computer. Now we have the computer and the car being the same thing. You know,
Kind of, in some ways, a silly question. I mean, that was my imposition of asking a question that might surprise each of the participants. But I love the answers, you know, what my friend's saying. I hope so. I hope the computer replaces the car because of the, you know, the larger critique of, which we now understand is problematic, of the internal combustion engine. Burning fossil fuel is going to, you know, basically destroy the planet in the latter part of this century. So I wanted to introduce that in a way that would be relevant, that would, you know, and what happened was it created surprising answers, I think, in terms of who was ready for the computer to replace the automobile. So it wasn't so much a literal question as a symbolic question, right? I mean, let's look at all of these systems in a larger context, in a larger way.
Yeah, I just think that now we have computers running cars and you don't even need people in the car.
Or, yeah.
So
Yeah, and we have autonomous cars.
yeah, that's what I'm talking about.
Of course. But,
Where do you see the technology, what is the word, curve? Yeah, the technology curve, what is that now? Are you able to look into the future if you were to make a film like this today? How the hell would you begin?
well, I'd probably want to hand it off to a younger filmmaker who was more embedded in that, in the technical
Or
world.
students, university students?
Yeah, yeah.
With your architectural lens through your film work over the years, do you want to talk about that at all?
Yeah, of course, I was trained as an architect and almost immediately abandoned the profession by founding an alternative architectural practice that was ANFARM. But there's a certain eye that was trained during that there was 6 years of studying architecture, and I still love architecture. So, you know, hopefully that becomes evident in what I shoot as a director. It's interesting that the film about Miami, which is called Miami Beach Elegy, was, I think, 2 years before the collapse of the condominium. It wasn't technically in Miami Beach, but Surfside was just over the border from Miami Beach. And so, you know, in some ways, I was so far ahead of the curve to look at Miami Beach, while it's still a bustling, but it's, you know, it's really a place created in the 20th century, from being a barrier island with nothing but, you know, native species living on it, to what it is today. But, you know, that's going to be, that curve of progress is going to be turned around probably by the end of this century. But maybe not. Maybe they can build a seawall around it. Maybe there's technology to come that we don't even know to save Manhattan or Miami Beach from rising sea level.
With building the beach, what could you say more about, like, how much footage have you accumulated from the last film?
Yeah, the finished work is basically a half hour, and it was done with over a period of 2 different film shoots that were about 6 months apart. I was just attracted to the idea of looking at Miami Beach, and just went with Chris Beaver as the cinematographer. We went down there together and spent, I think, a week there initially. And So there's no interviews in Miami Beach Elegy, so it's a matter of how do you tell the story, and you follow kinds of visual clues, you look for places to shoot. Here again, we went to the City Hall area for some other reason, and there were these realtors. It was a realtors convention, Caldwell Bankwell, and they had that inflated earth. And so to me, this is a perfect visual metaphor that they're bouncing the planet around without any regard, except to get their picture taken in front of you.
Do we have any other questions? I'm trying to
Maybe
make sure I
just
scan
turn
the
the
room.
lights up because
Yeah.
we
You had your hand?
we're looking
Yeah.
at
Or you
it.
had yours? Yeah. After you.
Oh, yeah, you mentioned the Benjamin's the arcade project, and I just wondered how much the debates on technology in the early 20th century or informed your film.
Could you repeat the question?
With Benjamin, with the idea of using Benjamin's ideas, that philosophy or the questions presented,
Yeah.
can you speak more about that and how you feel
I
now?
have the Susan Buckmore's book about the Arcades project, and just the idea that he was so involved with this ideas of modernism that were emerging at the beginning of the 20th century, that just didn't feed my imagination in a specific or literal way, but it became a sort of guidepost of things to look at. And then it seemed like, naturally, let's look at the department store. In this case, it was a giant record,
Virgin Records?
Virgin Record store that used to be not far from here. And, I love that shot working with Chris Beaver because he came up with the idea of doing it as a continuous take from the third level down to the second, down the escalator, and to end up on Market Street, where you get kind of double signage telling you it's market, and we're talking about the idea of the department store as a marketing, historic marketing of market. And then, something I always told I kind of both learned from that shot and have told many students this. Always, when you think the shot is over, you might want to let the camera run a little bit longer. And that's what happened there. The shot was over when we arrived at the street level. And then suddenly this guy pulling like a covered wagon with all his possessions walked by. So it added, a punchline or another level of meaning visually, I think. The other thing I wanted to say though is that seeing it again, the people lining up for free food at Food Not Bombs, they look so clean cut. They're not like, unfortunately, the homeless people we're seeing on the streets today. So that's an obvious point of comparison, I think.
You had your hand up?
Yes, so what are a few things you would have done differently today, or what do you think is the best point in that film to carry us today? I mean,
Yeah, it's a good question. I think there's many possibilities. The optimism of the two interviews with people who are working in technology, there's three people actually. And of course, that's kind of been all consolidated, let's say, in the 22 years since then. So there's no doubt now, there's no questioning that the world we live in is, a world of technology. I think that's one of the larger issues perhaps. Jeff?
Yeah. Is there any other last questions? I could say a few things before we go. I just want to make sure everybody got to one back here. There's a question in the back. Go ahead.
Well, it was just your films, re-seeing it now, I just want to say it's interesting to think about how much people are drawn to immersive experiences, these kind of fabricated spaces. But that moment where John Sanborn is talking about that sensual experience of being in the car on the highway and all the ways that he describes it, in that moment there is just such a desire to be in spaces that are, so place-based. It's just interesting to think about that difference. I don't know that you really can get that experience of driving down Highway 1 in a car and feeling the air and listening to the music on the radio and the way he uses the word tender. There's just a description there that just reminds us visceral living is hard to replace.
Absolutely, because that was such a romantic portrayal of the idea. And I think it was really a sort of throwback to another era
Yeah.
of, so different from present day driving around San Francisco.
Very different.
So that's a good point.
I think the public space commentary is also about, like, you want to be able to walk around a city and you feel the intensity, the smells, which streets are going to be more funky than others.
Yeah.
Like, you're able to kind of go on an adventure if you want, and it just depends on how intense you want the adventure or how unpredictable on those kind of measured levels. Which maybe if you include, like, dreaming, that could maybe somehow, lucid dreaming, but that's another movie.
Yeah.
I want to thank everybody. I want to thank Claire, Sue, Inga, Garai. Is there any announcements we should make before we adjourn? Are you guys ready to go home? We'll let everybody leave now. Thank you for coming.
Thank you.
We got some more events coming up. If you have an idea for an event, talk to us. Let us know. Maybe we can do an event with you here. So I want to let everybody know, have a happy, safe, relaxing holidays and a wonderful new year. We'll see you again soon.
Bye now. We're not gonna come by here one of these days when you're not.
I don't want to forget this VHS. I loved holding it. It was like...
I know, I miss it. Forget all the
We gotta hook up the DVD player somehow, the TV.
I miss physical.
Yeah.
Thank you for hosting this event. My name's Jarek, by the way.
Nice to meet you, Jared.
Nice to meet you. Do you have, is this an ongoing series?
I'll have a screening next week. If you ever need a host for something, let me know.
What is your criteria for having screenings here?
We try to show films by local filmmakers. We'd like to have an in-person, not to be too ironic, but an in-person Q&A.
Sure.
We have done some, like, Zoom-style ones. The other person, they couldn't always see us, but they could hear us. We could see them. It did work out if that would be the case. But we're open to doing